Hi there, welcome to another edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host Adam Cook, coming to you this week from my back deck. Yes, because of COVID-19 protocols across Nova Scotia, the Telile building in Arichat is still shut down. We can't do interviews in the Telile studios, but we can still produce Telile 24/7. I'm doing most of the work from right here at our house in Port Hawkesbury, and we're going to keep bringing you the stories that matter the most to you. As you might expect, we're talking a lot about the spread of coronavirus around Nova Scotia and around Canada this week, but we also have some stories dealing with other issues. We actually have a story coming up a little later on from the Port Hawkesbury waterfront about an issue that developed before the COVID-19 protocols were put into place and is still relevant today. So stay tuned for that coming a little later on. We also have interviews with Cape Breton-Canso MP Mike Kellaway about what the federal government is doing in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to be speaking with a local business owner who wasn't impressed with the rules that her landlord gave her for dealing with the shutdown of her business as a result of the COVID-19 protocols. But we're going to begin very quickly with an update on what's happening with COVID-19 in Nova Scotia. As you may know by now, the province has had its first death as a result of COVID-19. It did happen in the eastern zone under the Nova Scotia Health Authority. That takes in all of Cape Breton Island and northeastern Nova Scotia, and it includes our Telile viewing audience. That person who did pass away from COVID-19 was in their 70s, according to Chief Medical Officer Dr. Robert Strang, and that person had had a pre-existing condition that came around before COVID-19 was contracted. All of this brings Nova Scotia's cases as of Tuesday, April 7th, to 310, with 17 cases marked down in the 24 hours previous to the release of the data at about noon on Tuesday. So how are we going to deal with all of the concern that happens around COVID-19, and how are we going to figure out exactly what we should be doing to practice safe social distancing and stop the spread of the disease in our communities? Well, to help us do that this week, we've brought in a veteran physician from Isle Madame who has just recently reinstated his medical license to be able to assist with putting an end to COVID-19 in this community and around the country. He is Dr. Robert Martel. He was kind enough to come into the Telile studios while they were still operating earlier in March to give us some information about COVID-19 and its spread and try to explain why this is a disease unlike any other. So we're going to include some clips from those visits from Dr. Martel throughout the show, just as a friendly reminder to all of you to help you know what to do in terms of stopping COVID-19 from spreading and keeping yourselves and your family and your loved ones from getting it as well. First up, let's ask Dr. Martel what exactly social distancing is all about.
This means that all public places are closed to the general public. Both individuals and businesses are subject to substantial fines under this law, and there is an expectation that people will be deterred from leaving their homes for social events and for gatherings. In 2016, we had 8,700 residents living in Richmond County. 50% of those people were over 55, and 1/3 were over 65. Our demographics are similar to Italy. We are an aging population, and we are probably one of the oldest demographics in Canada. People without those symptoms between 19 and 40, without symptoms between 19 and 40 can infect people, and that is what happened in Italy. Italy is a culture of multi-generational living. The older people in that culture are very valued. They often live with their families. So, for those 19 to 40 age group, they tended not to quarantine, they tended not to self-isolate, they tended not to social distance, in that period from the first 2 Chinese tourists to the time that they started to lock down the community. As a result, those people became the reservoir, the vector for the virus, and infected their older relatives and friends. It is no wonder that the numbers in Italy are so high. The whole purpose of social distancing and social isolation is to reduce the number of people that are going to come in contact with other people that could then become the vector, the place where the virus resides and passes it on to other people. This is not rocket science. The virus cannot live unless it has a host. If we stay away from people, the virus will eventually die out. It will not have a place on which to land and to grow.
Thank you, Dr. Martel, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again a little later in the show. Right now, we'd like to speak to Cape Breton-Canso MP Mike Kellaway. He was first elected as a Liberal MP for the riding back in October. Back then, I don't think anybody thought that he would be conducting a lot of his business as an MP from his home, and that he wouldn't even be able to sit in the House of Commons with the way things are going. But Mr. Kellaway has given us an opportunity to share some information about what exactly is happening in terms of the federal government's response to all those impacted by COVID-19, including business owners, individuals, seasonal workers, and those in the fishery and tourism industries. I spoke to Mr. Kellaway by phone a little earlier this week. Here's that conversation right now. Speaking to Cape Breton-Canso MP Mike Kellaway today, and I know, Mike, that you wanted to get in touch with us to be able to speak a little more about what's going on in terms of the federal government's response to the COVID-19 crisis. I want to begin, though, on the idea that this is rather a sobering day for you as a member of Parliament and for all of us here in your riding, because we're just a couple of hours removed from learning that Nova Scotia has had its first death from COVID-19, and that has happened in the eastern zone, which takes in all of Cape Breton Island and northeastern Nova Scotia. So very likely that that would have happened in terms of either your riding or the neighbouring riding of your caucus colleague Jamie Battiste from Sydney, Victoria. Can you give me your immediate reaction to this news and just your thoughts as we're mulling over this sad news?
Well, I mean, you've said it. It's sad news. Someone's lost a loved one, a friend, and it speaks to the seriousness and the unforgiving nature of this virus. Some people get it, recover. Some people get it and have a hard time with it. And as this person has succumbed to the virus. So it's a very sad day. It just speaks to the importance, again, of the rules and protocol around public health that the Minister of Health federally and provincially and the public health official, lead public health official, Dr. Tam and Dr. Snang in Nova Scotia, and the Prime Minister and the Premier have been talking about is there is a reason for social distancing and there is a reason for self-isolation. And it's so important and very sad news and sobering news for people, I hope, as well, that, you know, they'll take heed to the importance of the measures that are being put in place. And my heart goes out to the family and friends and of this individual that has passed away. It's a very sad day indeed, and it's one that I think we can all relate to.
You spoke about social isolation, and I know that it's been a difficult time for all of us as we're processing the information that there have been an increased number of cases, but also hearing about the death this morning. That being said, you're in social isolation just like the rest of us are, so, you know, you're not in every part of the constituency. It's a large constituency anyway, but do you get the sense that within this part of Nova Scotia, within Cape Breton Island and northeastern Nova Scotia, that people do seem to be following the rules? What's your take on how social distancing is working in Cape Breton-Canso?
In the last 2 weeks, I've seen an improvement. in terms of people self-isolating, and certainly intel that I'm getting that more and more people are doing that. But it's not good enough. We need everyone to self-isolate. Now, there are those that are deemed essential workers. So those are your truck drivers to ensure the supply chain when it comes to food supply, gets through, fuel, things of that nature. There are those that work in the grocery stores. God bless them. There are those that are in the healthcare community, from CCAs, LPNs to doctors and nurses. They're essential. And, certainly our farmers and fishers are essential for the very purpose of the supply chain, that is the food supply chain. But if you don't have to, if you're not an essential worker, it is clear, and it couldn't be any more clear with the provincial emergency measures in place, that if you're out and you're about and you're in a group of people and that you shouldn't be, and that you'll be fined or there'll be jail time. So, Adam, we're doing a really good job. We need to do a better job. This virus is a sneaky virus. This virus will give the illusion that it's taken a dip, but it could come back with a vengeance. So we have to be diligent and focused and coordinated, respectful. But again, all of those words are just words if we do not practice them, and we have to practice them. And it's not easy. It's not easy to stay in your home for a lot of reasons and work from home or whatever the case may be. And it's a personal sacrifice. It's a family sacrifice. But ultimately, you're making the right decisions, because the decision that you make could save your spouse, could save your children, could save your brother, sister, or even someone you don't know. This is a chance to actually save a life. And that's absolutely not, I'm not being, there's not hyperbole there. That's what the science, that is what about medical health professionals are telling us. So, are we doing a good job? I think we're doing a better job. Do we consistently need to do a better job and do a full court press on this when it comes to social distancing and self-isolation? Yes. Do we need to hold up our essential workers in high praise? Absolutely. And, you don't have to go on Netflix or Disney Plus to see the Avengers. You have superheroes around you in Richmond County, and in Inverness County, and Guysborough County, and Antigonish County, and the CBRM that are going to work every day to ensure that we have supply, fuel, and these are the important things that we need to get behind, and we need to consistently practice social distancing and self-isolation. And again, our generation, the generation right now, all of the generations that are part of this moment in time, we need to harken back to the greatest of generations in World War II and the Depression and World War I, where a lot of sacrifice was made for the benefit of the whole. And when I look at Cape Breton Council, I look at the 5 municipalities and the 3 First Nations communities and the variety from Pomcat to Shellycamp to Isle Madame of Acadian communities of richness in diversity, richness in experience. We're resilient. We have been for a century plus, through economic hardships to natural disasters and resource-based crises and disasters of their own. We need to work together. We need to consistently not let up on this enemy. And this enemy is a virus, and it doesn't play fair.
That is very true. And in that spirit of self-isolation, you and I were talking not long ago about how your job has changed. You're doing so much work from home and fielding the calls of people. I believe you told me that sometimes you can be going from very early in the morning till very late at night. What has it been like for you as you're trying to answer constituents' questions in the middle of this crisis?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, when before the crisis, you're working from a constituency office, and we had our mobile offices that were quite successful, going outside of the CBRM one day a week to work in a community, because that's what community said to me. They said they want to see the MP. They want to be able to talk to the MP or the MP staff in the community where they live, or at least the area that they live. So, and then working in Ottawa, as you say. What's different? We're still reaching out to constituents. We are still reaching out to the MLAs, the different levels of government. In some ways, it's interesting. There's seemingly, more connectivity during a crisis, because you got to be absolutely, every call is critical, is a priority in my mind. So I have 5 people on staff. 6 of us are triaging calls and emails, but we're also putting forward, which is, I got to give a shout out to the people of Cape Breton Council. The first briefing note that we were asked to send to the Minister of Finance before the first stimulus package was released, we were asked to submit a note on what the priorities were in terms of funding for people that may not have EI, for businesses and things of that nature. Our briefing note got flagged by the Minister of Finance, and they called and they said, we just wanted to say your submission, we flagged it. There's some really good ideas and really good insight here. And I said, well, don't thank me. Thank the people of Cape Breton Council, because I reached out to the tourism operators, the municipalities, the MLAs, throughout the riding, provincial representatives, private business, not-for-profit. And really it was those folks that helped populate that briefing note. And 70% of what was in that briefing note ended up in the stimulus package, the first measure. So this is a chance for us also in a crisis situation. It's scary. It's unnerving. But there's also chances for us to be a little bit innovative in terms of how we respond to it, different from what we would do in a normal day. And case in point, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Adam, 2.5 months ago, I was advocating for a pilot project in Cape Breton Council with respect to a basic income pilot. In essence, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit is that. And so this is a chance for us to be creative, and everybody's ideas are needed to be on the table. Your concerns are needed, your ideas, and your potential solutions, because I've seen it have an impact directly on things like the wage subsidy. Initially, the wage subsidy was at 10%. I received many calls from small and medium-sized enterprise throughout the riding. Said, Mike, whatever you can do, can you talk to the people? Can you talk to the cabinet ministers to say we need to do better on the wage subsidy? Myself and many other MPs that were in the same boat as me echoed that concern and that solution, and it turned out that the cabinet, to their credit, was listening, and now it's at 75%. So your ideas matter. Your ideas matter in a time of crisis, because we're all in this together, and we're going to get out of this together. We are going to get out of this together, and things may be a little different. Some things that we have here, who knows? It may become a best practice model that we may want to continue. I know I'm in favor of a basic income for people in Cape Breton Council, for people of the country. And I would like to see that continue, and I'll certainly be advocating for that.
Mike, I'm glad to hear you talking a little bit about the CERB. I wanted to focus on a couple of specific industries in Cape Breton Island that really are likely to take a hit in terms of the next few months. Let's talk a little bit about the tourism sector, if we could, because if social distancing and social isolation protocols are in effect for weeks or months, as the Prime Minister is suggesting, that could really put a hole in the tourism industry for the coming months and even for longer than that. Do you have a sense that tourism interests could play a part in these discussions in terms of how to be able to keep the economy of this area going over the next little while?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I too think about the tourism operators, small, medium-sized, and even the larger ones, but in particular the small ones that are the bread and butter of tourism in Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. So a couple of things I think will be helpful. One is around the 75% employee wages for employers, all sizes, as I mentioned, including not-for-profits and charities. So that's that they've suffered a drop in gross revenues, at least 30%. Many have already, just based on prognostications. This would be something that would be helpful to keep people on staff or bring people back. Other elements around putting a hold on payment on GST and HST to at least June will also help small and medium-sized businesses in the tourism sector. But I want to stress that these are just but the first measures. A couple of days ago, I sent a submission based on people that I've talked to throughout the riding, including sectoral groups that represent tourism operators like Destination Cape Breton. I submitted a plan that comes from the people of Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia around items that they're looking for in terms of interest-free loans, initiatives that will help with cash flow that are non-repayable, things of those nature that will help the tourism sector. So we have certainly the wage subsidy, and we have monies that we've infused into the EDC and BDC, and we've put forward a new emergency support initiative that will provide interest-free loans up to $40,000 for small and medium-sized business. But I know, being a former small business owner, that that will help, but it's not enough, and we need to do more. And so I'm looking forward to hearing the response back from our tourism briefing note on potential solutions for businesses in Cape Breton Council.
All right, we hope to hear on that shortly. Wondering as well about the status of the lobster fishery as we're going forward. In just a couple of weeks' time, it would be the time for dumping day in many areas of Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. Looks like we could see an impact on there as well. Is that part of the discussions you're having with your cabinet colleagues and with your fellow MPs as we're heading into the later part of the spring when we could see a big hit to the lobster fishery here?
Yes, it is. I've sent off a communique to Bernadette Jordan on what I'm hearing from my I've lost count, actually, in terms of the associations that I have met with in terms of the fishery over the past 2 weeks. I've met with, if not all of them, close to all of them, on the east side of the island and up to Guysborough, and on the west side and the Gulf side of the island. And I've put forward a communique to Bernadette on it based on my discussions with harvesters and plant workers and people that are involved on the processing side from a management perspective. So we have, it's one of the great things about our riding is that it's distinct. I believe it's rich in diversity. There's no question about that. So we have some associations that are looking forward to fishing and adhering to the right health protocols and any other new measures that may come from DFO around the fishery. And then we have groups like the Gulf, on the Gulf side, that believe that the fishing season needs to not start, and that it needs to the government needs to look at some assistance for fishers to help them bridge the gap between this year and next year. And I've met with all different groups on all sides of this topic. What I will say is that I'm an advocate for the entire riding. So those individuals in Guysborough, those individuals in Glace Bay, and other parts that are looking to fish, I want to ensure it's done with the health protocols adhered to, full through and through. And the Gulf, I want to make sure that I advocate for their point of view with the Minister of Fisheries and the rest of the Cabinet to ensure that the proposals they put forward are reviewed and given a serious consideration. So when a riding is this distinct, we have different points of view, but I value each one of them, and I see value in each of them, and I will continue to advocate. And some say when I'm in Ottawa that I'm a bit of a fighter and a bit of an independent thinker, and I am. And my take on it is that we need to look at the health of the individuals. When we do fish, that we need to make sure it's done with the health protocols followed, and also we need to ensure that the government is there to support those that have supported us for centuries.
One last question to you, Mike, as we talk about your persona and your time in Ottawa. When you were elected to your first federal seat this past fall, of course, none of us could have expected that a nationwide and worldwide pandemic would take place and change the way that individual members of Parliament do their work. I mean, you folks aren't even able to be in Ottawa right now, to be in the House of Commons. That being said, what do you feel that you'll take away from this whole situation that will strengthen you and help you to better be able to do your job as a member of Parliament? What are some of the things that you've learned or you've taken away from this, and maybe that we could all take away from all of this?
I would look at it, Adam, as when I think of that question, I think of words, and these are words that are reflective of me, but not just me, my family, my neighbors, and my constituents. But I look at adaptability, flexibility, collaboration. When we look at challenges, sometimes we're so quick to say that can't be done. But if you look at the policies that have been enacted in the past 14 days, providing a basic income to potentially 6 million Canadians, that was done in 14 days. That was done in 14 days, I'll repeat that. What we can do when we put aside some of the silliness that tends to happen in government and look at the needs of the people now and into the future. And I think what this crisis has done, number one, it's an immensely sad health issue, challenge, and crisis. You can't forget that. But what it is also doing for us is it is, I think, in some cases, enabling us to look at the art of the possible. The art of the possible in terms of working differently. The art of the possible about looking at that jobs, a lot of jobs these days, can happen anywhere. They can happen in downtown Toronto, but they can happen in Arishat just as easy. I'm thinking of EI jobs. I'm thinking of citizenship and immigration jobs. How we work, what we do. It has opened up what has been really the case for the past 20 years, but a lot of structures haven't recognized the fact that we need to think differently, we need to work differently, and in some ways I think that is to the advantage of rural communities. So if we take these opportunities and look at them not as just 6 weeks in duration, but 6 years and 60 years in duration in terms of taking the practices that we are putting forward in terms of how we work and the decision-making process by which we come to very profound policies that impact Canadians, the things that we can do, we haven't even scratched the surface. It's crises like these that enables us to show what we're capable of.
Well, I think we've seen how Cape Bretoners and folks in northeastern Nova Scotia and around the world are reaching out beyond what they might have thought they're able to do, and we appreciate you giving us a minute or two here. I know this is a busy time for you, of course, but we appreciate you giving us some time here on Telile 24/7. Thank you so much, Mike Kellaway, for giving us a minute or two here.
And Adam, I want to thank you and Telile for keeping people through, not just on the island, but throughout the world, because I know you showcase this on YouTube. Thank you for providing so much important information, not just to the people of Richmond or Inverness County or CBRM or Guysborough or Antigonish, but people around the world. It's important work. Keep it up, and I'm grateful that you're doing it.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that, Mike, and we're glad to have you back on Telile 24/7, even through a different format, but we'll look forward to checking in with you again a little ways down the road. Thank you again for giving us some time today.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
No trouble at all. Mike Kellaway is the Member of Parliament for Cape Breton-Canso. He spoke to us by phone from his constituency office. Stay tuned for more. Telile 24/7.
The transmission mode is through droplets, meaning that this is a respiratory virus. When you cough or even when you speak, droplets come out of your mouth, or when you sneeze, they come out of your nose. Those often can spray 6 feet. That's why there's a 2-meter rule. Stay away from people by at least 2 meters. The droplets can fall onto hard surfaces like tables, onto your clothing, and can live, the virus within those droplets can live between 4 and 24 hours. It's really not clear. All that means is that you need to scrub your surfaces very carefully, even coughing into your elbow, which has been identified as a precautionary measure. It's important to realize that those droplets are now on your clothing. The best approach is to cough or sneeze into 2 Kleenexes, discard them, wash your hands immediately afterwards. A virus needs a living host. It cannot replicate itself unless it has live tissue. If the host has a defense mechanism to kill that virus, such as an antibody, it will be stopped in its tracks. This virus spreads like the flu, a common influenza A and B, which infects 60 to 70% of people worldwide every year. The majority of people really don't experience symptoms from that infection for several reasons. One is we have herd immunity, which means that we have been exposed over many, many years to several strains of influenza, and some of that experience has translated into an antibody load which protects us. In addition, we have a vaccine. The vaccine has been very effective at protecting a majority of the population, such that those that become sick are often people who have not been vaccinated or who have low antibody loads. And finally, we do have antivirals that are effective in stopping or at least reducing the symptoms of influenza A and B. None of those are in effect with coronavirus COVID-19. We do not have antibodies because this is a completely new virus. Our bodies do not recognize this virus, so has not been able to mount a response. It will be months before that happens. We don't have a vaccine, and we don't expect to have a vaccine for 6 months at the very least. And finally, we do not have any medication to treat this virus. If you think that we are immune on Alma Dam, just remember this. 100 years ago, this year, 20,000 people died with Spanish flu in Canada. 2,200 of those were in this province. That's 200 more than were killed in the Halifax explosion. You can check out our own graveyards on Alma Dam, where you will see many people between the ages of 19 and 40 from the same family.
Thank you, Dr. Martel. We'll look forward to seeing you a little later on in the show as well. Those of you that have come to the Port Hawkesbury Shopping Centre over the past couple of years have probably noticed a new business called Cutting Edge Studio and Boutique. It's run by Ashley Taylor. She took over the business roughly 6 years ago. In 2018, the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce awarded Taylor and her Cutting Edge colleagues the Rising Star Award for New Business Excellence. However, just recently, Taylor, like many others that operate hair salons and barbershops across the province, were forced to close her business as a result of COVID-19 protocols. She wasn't prepared for the announcement that she got from the landlord of the Port Hawkesbury Shopping Centre, Telile Development, based in Montreal. But instead of simply simmering and letting it all stew within her, Taylor decided to go public with the remarks that she had received from Telile Development, and it's developed into quite an interesting story for her and for her business. I spoke to Ashley Taylor earlier this week on the phone. Here's that conversation now. Speaking with Ashley Taylor, who is the owner-operator of Cutting Edge Studios at the Port Hawkesbury Shopping Centre. So the reason that we have you here, Ashley, is because you got a letter from the operators of the Port Hawkesbury Shopping Centre, Telile Development, based in Montreal, just as you were getting ready to shut down your salon. So can you give me a sense of just the basic timeline here? Because I know the provincial government had given you not a lot of notice, 24 hours notice to say salons, barbershops and such had to be shut down. So can you take me back to that period and then what you felt like when you got that letter?
Yes, so on Wednesday, we were all kind of doing our thing at the store and at the salon, trying to figure out our next move. We had done all of the suggestions that health I guess Nova Scotia or whatever it's called, had given us to be able to still be open. But we knew that Stephen McNeil was going to come on that afternoon and basically let us know that we weren't going to be able to be open anymore. We've heard that coming through the Association of Nova Scotia, that we were going to be mandated to close. We just weren't sure when. So in that Wednesday afternoon, he had given us a 24-hour period. We needed to be closed by midnight on Thursday. So we all decided as a staff that I would operate on Thursday. Everybody else would officially be laid off, unfortunately, and I would close up shop on Thursday. So me and Natalie worked on Thursday. Natalie worked until 5. I had stayed until 9, trying to fit everybody in, as obviously the phone was ringing off the hook with panic of people trying to get their hair cut because they had now realized that that wasn't going to be an opportunity anymore, and that I feel like they also thought, okay, it's going to be months before I can get my hair cut again. So I had worked till 9, closed up the shop, went home, decided that I was going to repaint the shop while all this was closed and use my time wisely. So I went back in on Monday morning to find the letter, and it says, "Dear tenant," and this is how it opens. "We have been notified that you closed your store with us at the Port Hawkesbury Shopping Center on March 19th, 2020, which is a default under your lease. So not, "Hi, sorry you had to close, you were mandated from the government, hope you're all well, we have solutions for you." It's, "You defaulted on your lease." The next paragraph goes in to say that they are trying to be in with the times in accordance with the government's emphasis on focus on slowing down COVID-19, and that they have taken steps to increase cleaning and provide sanitized station in all major entrances and exits. So what I gathered from that was, okay, we put hand sanitizers there, you should still be open. And the third paragraph says, "We would like to remind you that even if you close your store, this does not relieve you from paying your rent or any other amounts payable under your lease. Our expenses continue to count on your usual collaboration in honor of your obligations. We eagerly look forward to resuming as normal and as normal with our lives as possible." So the third paragraph basically is reminding me to pay my rent, and they want me back to work as soon as possible. When I read that, first thing I did was kind of cry, because I know I defaulted on my lease, but I was mandated by the government to close. Second of all, I understand that they put hand sanitizer stations in the mall, which regardless of whether they did or not, I was still not allowed to open under the government's rules. And regarding to the third paragraph, they're assuming on March 19th that I am not going to pay my rent. I had no problems with paying my April's rent. I had all intentions of paying my April's rent. To be honest, I wasn't sure exactly what the next few months are going to bring or what's it going to mean as a small business, but I was definitely going to try to fulfill my obligation as best as I could.
So this must have been difficult for you. Like you say, not only did they essentially say, "Go back to work anyway, we're setting this up so you can do this," but they made an assumption with no grounds to make that assumption that you were going to default on your lease and that you were going to stop paying your rent. And I mean, you've suggested that this is a very emotional time for you and you had quite a reaction, but just the very idea that they'd say, "We don't expect you to pay your rent since you've defaulted on your lease." I mean, how did that make you feel at that point?
It really kind of hurt my feelings, because I've never not paid my rent, and I've always worked very hard to pay everything from building a salon from scratch. I mean, I can't expect them to waive my rent either. That was never an intention or an expectation of mine. I'm still new to business, and I feel like all small businesses right now are in uncharted territories. We have no idea what we can and cannot do. We just know that as these businesses remain closed, we all still have bills to pay, but yet we have no income. So, I mean, I felt very lucky that I was able to pay my April's rent, and that was my full intention from when I received that letter, and I was very kind of hurt that they were just making sure that I knew that I still had to pay my rent. And I feel like the letter was presumptuous in the sense that they didn't reach out to say, "Hey, you know what, we understand you're a small business. If you need anything, we gladly work with you. We understand that you were mandated to close. We're sorry that this has happened, and this is the time that we're living in. If there's anything that we can do, feel free to reach out." It mentions nothing in there about if I have any questions or concerns to reach out.
So what happened from that point in terms of your discussions with the mall management and with the mall ownership, Toulon Development. Can you give me a sense of what happened from there?
Well, I didn't contact them right away. I contacted my lawyer first, and then I went to Facebook with a picture of my letter. And obviously their office is closed and they're working from home. So it was about, I would say, a week later before I got in contact with Perry, the lady who had written the letter. I expressed my concerns about the letter, which she said was standard, which, okay, that's fine. However, you're sending out a letter that is not very helpful to all of the standard small businesses that rent from you. So basically, I asked her, since the government had come out with the rent deferral program, I had read into it and I did qualify. So I did ask her if that was something that they would be willing to work with me on. And she had no interest in that whatsoever. She said the best that they could do for me was for me to pay half of my April's rent. And then from this point forward, they weren't discussing it because I was going to be back open in May. So I expressed my concerns again that unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be May that I'm open. I think it's going to be June or July before we are going to be open again. And I just need to make a plan. I mean, I don't need free rent per se. I just need to make a plan going forward. So with the government having the rent deferral program, I thought, okay, perfect. That will help me. That will help Toulon. This will bridge that gap of the uncertainty. They will get their money, and it will give me a little bit of extra time to pay for that.
I'm intrigued that they thought that you could be opened up again in May, and I note with some interest that this is communication coming from Toulon Development Headquarters in Montreal, which was recently identified by the Chief Medical Officer in Quebec as a hotbed for COVID-19 cases. Did it seem like they were showing a bit of ignorance of just how much this could spread here in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, she actually talked about her hair and how she was going to not have her hair done. I didn't want to be mean, but I thought, like, are you even paying attention to what is happening in the country?
So let me pick up on the idea that you posted your letter from Toulon Development to Facebook. I know it did get quite a bit of play. Can you tell me a little bit about the support you seem to have gotten from different corners of the province and even outside the province about what your situation has been and how Toulon has responded?
Yeah, once I posted it to Facebook, actually a lot of news media people were tagged in it, but also the Nova Scotia Small Business Affiliation also saw my letter. So they reached out to me and actually offered me an opportunity to represent salons and spas and chair rentals and room renters in our industry to participate in a Zoom interview with Mr. Bernie Miller, the Minister of Business. So it was actually kind of good that I had posted that because I actually got to express my concerns for our industry, what kind of hurdles we're going to have as a whole, and what the province is going to do to help us.
Now, as you mentioned speaking to the Minister of Business, how did that conversation go, and how do you feel the response was from that level of the provincial government?
The conversation was very good. There was about 8 of us, ranging from boutique owners, used bookstore owners, bars, and restaurants in Halifax. There was a gentleman who owned a business. I'm not sure what business he had, but it was in Lunenburg County. So there was representatives for all over the province and of different businesses. And a lot of them expressed their concern with the rent deferral program for the business. For businesses. A lot of them didn't think that was a great option, and a lot of people actually didn't qualify for it when it first came out. I do know that they had since changed some of their rules. But for me, that was probably the best thing that the government had released, and I was happy with that program. I thought that program was going to be a great benefit to me. I expressed to Bernie that I don't expect to get a free ride as a small business, but the government is going to get its money back if we borrow money from the government. The people that we rent from, they're going to get their money because we're going to pay the rent, or the government is going to guarantee the rent. But what about small business? There doesn't seem to be anything to help small business. Small business, I feel like, is the one that's taking the brunt of the cost of everything. So I feel like, and I told Bernie, the cost of not having the business open needs to be split 3 ways. It needs to be split with the government, it needs to be split with us, and it needs to be split with the people that we rent from. And it's not fair that small businesses are seeming to take on the full brunt of the cost.
Well, with that in mind, what does the future look like for you? I know there's still a lot of questions to be answered. We could be in this for weeks or even months in terms of social distancing protocols and businesses being closed like the one that you operate now. What keeps you going and what pushes you forward as you head into this uncertain era?
For me, it's passion. I have passion for the industry, and I have passion for the business that I run. And I have passion for people who also run small businesses. I mean, we are a breed. We are a kind of person, and I think we have a lot of push when it comes to running a business. So I will do everything I can for my business. I think we're going to be okay. It may be that I have to get a small loan just to make sure I have enough cash flow for when we open, but I think we're going to be just fine. The problem is I don't know if I'm going to be just fine if I can't open until September or October. So if I kind of knew when I could open, I would have a better plan. So right now the plan that I have may be changing daily depending on what things are being offered and what information the government is releasing. But as for Cutting Edge Studio and Boutique, I think it will be just fine. It's just a matter of learning and trying to figure out what programs are going to be best for us.
Well, I want to wrap this up, Ashley, as we look into this uncertain era by talking a bit about the support you've been getting from your customers and from local residents. And we saw that in the early goings when you posted this letter from Toulon Development on Facebook. What has that meant to you as you've been trying to figure out just how to keep your business rolling in this uncertain era?
I can't thank the people that read it and commented and the people that support me enough. I mean, there's a lot of small businesses out there and there's a lot of awesome people that run these small businesses, but the fact that people took the time to share and read my letter, reach out, was absolutely fantastic. I can't thank them enough. I mean, I went to a drive-through to get a coffee, and the lady's like, I can't really speak. She's like, but I'm just going to tell you that Port Hawkesbury is behind you. She's like, I am so sorry you received such a letter. She's like, Ashley, you open up back up. She's like, and you will be just fine. She's like, this town needs people like you. So the fact that I don't really know that lady and she would say that to me as I'm getting a coffee, I thought was just lovely. And I'm not the only small business that received this letter, and I'm not the only small business that's going to receive a letter like this. It's just we have to realize that the small business in our towns and in our communities are the backbone. We do need to support them because they are usually the ones that will support us in the end.
We've covered a lot of ground here in a short time, and I really appreciate you giving me some time here. Did you want to add anything else about all of this before we wrap up?
I would also just like to say, thank you so much to the girls that work for me. I know it's an uncertain time for them. I know it's an uncertain time for me, and I hate it to lay them off. But when this is all said and done, we're going to be back, we're going to be together, and we're going to be stronger than ever.
We're looking forward to that, and I know you folks are as well. Ashley, thank you so much for giving me some time here on Telile 24/7.
Thank you, Adam.
Ashley Taylor is the owner of Cutting Edge Studios and Boutique in the Port Hawkesbury Shopping Centre. She's been speaking to us by phone. Stay tuned for more Telile 24/7 in just a moment.
The criteria for testing are straightforward. You have to have a temperature of 38 degrees Celsius or more. You have to have a known contact with an infected person. And you have to have travel outside Canada. If you meet those 3 criteria, call 811. You will be directed to a COVID testing site, and the nearest one is at Strait Richmond Hospital. If you need medical advice, call 811 or your family doctor. Doctors are taking calls. The government has instituted a fee through MSI to compensate them. Serious medical problems like heart attacks, strokes, car accidents, pneumonias, diabetic complications, mental health emergencies, and others are going to go on anyway. Those are not going to go away. Do not seek delaying help for any of these conditions because of this emergency order. Call 911. Do not show up at an emergency room without first calling. Take care of your loved ones and neighbors. Keep them safe. That will keep you safe. Reach out to the elderly. Follow the government's guidelines. Appoint one person per family to run errands. After returning home, wash your hands with hot water and soap for 20 seconds. Or use a disinfectant. Do not touch your face even with gloves.
Thank you, Dr. Martel. We'll look forward to getting some more COVID-19 tips from you a little later on. Now, you might be heartened to know that there are stories happening in our area that don't have to do with COVID-19 or the resulting protocols. As a matter of fact, Port Hawkesbury Town Council, which held a virtual council meeting on an internet app just a couple of nights ago, are having discussions with various potential partners about refurbishing a building on the Port Hawkesbury waterfront that has served many different functions over the years. And they'd like to turn it into a brand new facility with the working name of the Strait Area Innovation Center. Want to know more? Let's head quickly to the Port Hawkesbury waterfront for more details. Behind me is the Port Hawkesbury Creamery building. It's served many different purposes over the past century, and right now this structure is at the focal point of discussions between Port Hawkesbury Town Council and two other levels of government. Those discussions could see this building repurposed for the future, and it could also see a partnership between the town and the Nova Scotia Community College's Nautical Institute to help put a focus on oceans training and oceans research at this very facility. But before we get into some details there, how about a little history lesson? First of all, the name Creamery isn't an accident. On this very site in 1921, a functioning creamery opened up, supplying all kinds of dairy products not only to folks all around the strait, but as far north as Sydney. The building was destroyed in 1925. However, the creamery operation opened up in a new building not far from this one on the same site and continued to operate until 1951. In later years, many people came to this building because it was the Co-op building supplies store serving Port Hawkesbury and the surrounding area. In 1995, it was rechristened as an entertainment and community gathering center and served in this purpose for the following 11 years. There's a generation of Strait Area residents that knows the creamery for the events it hosted over its 11-year period as a community gathering center. For starters, it was the site of the popular Port Hawkesbury Tuesday Night Ceilidh series, which ran here from mid-June to mid-October. In the fall, this became known as a Celtic Colours performance venue, and for a generation of teenagers coming through Port Hawkesbury in the late 90s and early 2000s, this building was known as the site of teen dances during the summertime, which were locally known as the Creameries. However, in 2006, all of that changed. In the summer of 2006, three levels of government put together a package that awarded the creamery facility to Isle Madame Confectioners. The company already had a successful candy manufacturing and distribution center in Arishat, but decided to accept the creamery building as a new candy-making facility while moving their shop to the building on the Port Hastings Rotary that's now known as the Strait Area Museum. However, in 2008, bad fortune befell Isle Madame Confectioners, and a variety of unforeseen circumstances forced the company to file for bankruptcy in late 2008. The company moved its candy-making machinery out of the creamery building in 2009. Shortly thereafter, the provincial government and the town of Port Hawkesbury announced that it was going to join forces to refurbish the creamery building using a plan that had been devised in early 2008 to build a new arts and entertainment facility on the Port Hawkesbury waterfront known as Ship Harbour Place. So the Ship Harbour Place funds were diverted towards refurbishing the creamery so it could become the arts and entertainment facility that it had been back in the late 90s and early 2000s. Midway through 2010, the town of Port Hawkesbury exhausted the funding it had received from the federal and provincial governments to refurbish the creamery building and restore it to its former status as an entertainment and community gathering center. At the same time, the town ended its relationship with the Strait Area Waterfront Development Corporation, which had overseen the creamery building's operations for the previous 15 years. The building then sat idle for another 3 years, but in 2013, discussions picked up steam between the town and the provincial government to turn the Creamery building into a community health facility that could house not only doctors' offices, but several other offices, including public health, mental health, and addiction treatment. Those discussions didn't go anywhere, and for the past 10 years, the Creamery building has sat idle without any operations happening inside or outside. However, that may be all about to change. At Port Hawkesbury Town Council's last public meeting before COVID-19 protocols kicked in across the province, Chief Administrative Officer Terry Doyle unveiled a funding breakdown for a new project at the Creamery building to be known as the Strait Area Innovation Centre. If the project goes forward, the town would work with the federal and provincial governments to provide funding, as well as the Cape Breton Partnership. It would result in the town putting in $5,000 towards the overall $65,000 cost of the project. That includes $40,000 to be spent on a marine innovation center at the Creamery building, as well as $25,000 to be put towards an overall Port Hawkesbury waterfront development plan. Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton explains a little bit about what the Marine Innovation Centre could look like if the project goes forward.
We do have other partners at the table, as well as NSCC and Develop Nova Scotia. And the conversations around what we're hoping to achieve down on the waterfront is based on, creating an innovation space for oceans and marine. So it could be part of fleshing out that vision could be like what is our kind of comparative advantages that we could establish an innovation hub down at that waterfront location. So having a presence of NSCC down at the waterfront is extremely important, and we hope to attract some expertise with regard to ocean safety, which is definitely a national opportunity. And I really feel like the town of Port Hawkesbury could have this space so that we could be leaders perhaps in ocean safety or other areas regarding oceans or other kinds of industries. So the space will not only be restricted to ocean studies, but it could also be, certainly other areas as well.
With the project's focus on oceans and marine issues, as well as oceans and marine training, the mayor is hopeful that the Nautical Institute for the NSCC could be a major player in helping to develop the new project at the former Creamery building.
Yeah, so they'll definitely have a presence down at this space, and as we kind of continue forward with our vision of what this innovation space can look like. It's going to be, again, a conversation between all of our partners that are collaborating. And in terms of timeline, I'm not 100% sure as to when are we going to see some, hard details about all of the, partners that will be in that innovation space. But right now, it's just at the very early phase of discussion.
Whether or not the NSCC winds up being involved in the development of the Strait Area Innovation Centre, Mayor Chisholm-Beaton and Town Council are hopeful that the building that started out as a humble creamery in 1921 can prove once again in the 2020s that the cream always rises to the top on the Port Hawkesbury waterfront. At the Creamery building on the Port Hawkesbury waterfront for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook.
You are to make arrangements for groceries to be delivered outside your door. You are not to greet those individuals at the door. Have the groceries left by the door. If they touch the handle of the door, please clean that handle with a handy wipe or one of the disinfecting products. Take the food into your house, put it into your refrigerator or wherever you put it, then wash your hands. Do not touch your face. You are not permitted to leave your house for 14 days. I would suggest that you use the phone service at the co-op locally. You can also use online shopping with Superstore, and I believe Sobeys has the same service, where you can go online, choose the groceries that you want, pay for them online. They will arrange a time for you to pick those up, and and they will put them in your car for you. There is no need to interact or to go into the individual establishments. With respect to medical prescriptions, there is a limit to a 30-day supply that's been imposed to try to support the supply chain. I would call the individual pharmacies to understand what their process is, to make sure that that you are not exposed unnecessarily to individuals that may not honor social distancing. And it's also very important that pharmacy staff be protected from you as a possible carrier.
And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you'll be back next week. I want to thank as well our colleagues at Telile Community Television for helping out with getting the show on the air. A big thank you in that regard to Cora LeBlanc, Telile's business manager. And I'd like to say a special thank you to my tripod and camera operator this week, Kathy Cook, my wife. I really appreciate your help, and thank you so much for helping me to get the show together. A big thank you as well to Dr. Robert Martel for coming into the Telile studios a little earlier on and recording such helpful information about how to stop the spread of COVID-19 and how to protect ourselves from the virus. And if you would like to learn more about COVID-19 and about what you can do to stay safe and healthy during this time, there are a couple of links you can follow. The World Health Organization website is WHO.int. Again, for the World Health Organization website, WHO.int. You can also go to the national website set up by the federal government, canada.ca/coronavirus, and you can also get some information by visiting the Nova Scotia Health Authority website. That's the 811 website. They'll give you plenty of information as well. And we'll turn to our final word this week for Dr. Robert Martel, who has one last very important message to give all of us about COVID-19 and the times we find ourselves in. Dr. Martel.
The bottom line, without containment, meaning that we go on to do what we do normally, meeting with our friends, going into the community, not listening to officials that talk about social distancing and self-isolation. We might not be able to handle the surge. Testing and containment are the key strategies to be able to move forward with this approach.
Thank you once again, Dr. Martel, and we'd like to thank you as well for your service as a physician during this troubling time. If you have any questions or comments about the show, or if you have suggestions for stories we can cover as well, or people you'd like to see on the air, feel free to contact me directly. You can reach me at home. That number is 902-625-8863, and you can contact me via email. My address is adamjrcook, C-O-O-K-E, @yahoo.ca. And you can also follow Telile Community Television on our various social media feeds. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can probably catch this information, even as I speak, on this episode of Telile 24/7 on our YouTube channel. All the episodes of 24/7 are there for you to watch at your own convenience. I'm Adam Cook. Thank you for joining me this week, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Telile 24/7. Until then, take care and stay safe.